My name is David Rubin, and this is the Photo Breakdown.
Photo Breakdown is a podcast where I talk with a photographer sharing the story of a specific photograph, technique, or business win. I'm your host, Scott Weidenkivowitz, and this is the Photo Breakdown. Let's break it down. Today, I'm sitting down with David Rubin to talk about this really cool photograph that he has. And well, I'm not going to give anything away because we will get to it, but it is a gorgeous black and white photograph that I'm excited to learn more about. Hey, David, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, staying inside as much as possible. I actually have a pandemic wedding late tonight. I'm glad it's tonight and not today not during the day, because it's so disgustingly hot outside right now that I'm glad that the sun's going to be going down when this wedding happens.
Yeah, well, I live in Dallas, Texas, so I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So I've got two questions for you.
Sure.
The first, what are you not very good at?
Podcast.
Nice.
Yeah. No. As far as photography?
Just in general, just so people get to know you.
Okay. What am I not very good at? I'm not very good at being organized.
Mm.
It's like I'm the guy that like I like Einstein's thing about a messy desk is I don't know, it's a sign of a cluttered mind or not the sign or
Hmm.
whatever. But I know where everything is, but I just can't seem to quite get to it. So there's that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I like to say that I'm organized in certain ways. I've got OCD in certain ways. Like, for example, when I did a whole video on this long while ago, where like when I put my lenses on my shelf, I've got to put them a certain way. They have to be a certain way, and
Okay.
they have to be in like focal length order too, which is ridiculous.
That's very anal retentive, if I can say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay.
But but then if you look at the shelf otherwise, it's a hot mess.
Got it. Okay.
So, so that's really interesting. Okay, so second question, what are you most proud of?
What I'm most well, obviously, I'd have to say my two boys because I have two sons, one 19, one 17, and they're just awesome kids. So I have to say out of the way in case they ever listen to this, which they probably won't. But I think what I'm most proud of, I'm going to have to go in photography, is my street photography,
Mm,
and it's kind of my passion. And pandemic has slowed that down for me quite a bit because I don't like to use the words travel photography. I just happen to do it traveling. Uh, but yeah, I started this business late. I've only been a quote unquote professional photographer for about 9 years, but I've had 8 shows, and I do other forms of photography, but I think my fine art, my street photography, is what I'm really the most proud of.
awesome. Yeah, I looked at your portfolio. There's a lot of great stuff there. The one we're talking about today, in particular, actually does fall into, I believe, the travel
It it
category, but it's still street photos, of course.
it does, but
Um,
there's a when you want me to get into the backstory, it's kind of cool. So, but I hear
cool.
again, you're driving.
Before we dive in, this episode is sponsored by my lead generation course for photographers called More Leads, More Clients. Yes, if you would like to increase the leads you're generating on your photography site, you can use the strategies I teach in my course. Access it at scottwyden.com/leads. So let's break down the photo.
Sure.
Where was this photo photographed?
Okay. That was photographed in Paris, and
And what time period was this? Was this
uh,
recent or a while ago?
that was photographed in 2014. And I've used to live in Paris years ago, and I taught school there, and I go back quite often, and it's kind of like my home away from home. So
Mm,
that's usually my jumping off point to traveling. And so, but there, it was in the spring of 2014, and for spring break, I told my wife, "You're going to keep the kids, and I'm just going to photograph." And that's what I did. So I actually during that picture, there was a street photographer that I saw on Facebook, and I'm trying like heck to remember his name, and I think his last name was Rousseau, and he just had some awesome pictures, mostly monuments and things like that. But so I messaged him and I said, "Hey, I'm going to come over, and would you mind meeting with me? And we can hang out and go shoot." And he said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So we did, and it was
Nice.
with him that I photographed that. And he taught me several things. Some I use, some I don't. Uh, but do you want? Can I get into those or?
Well, so yeah, before we do that though, let's briefly describe this photo. So what I'm
Okay,
looking at right now is a gorgeous black and white. The tonal quality in this is absolutely stunning. And there's this sort of outdoor hallway with arches going all down this path.
right, right. For
Um,
your readers that might be familiar with Paris, this was in the sixth arrondissement, right close to the Luxembourg. It's where the Senate is, and there are these. There's a the Senate building is actually on two different streets, and there's arches going that way that you see, and then behind me going the other way as well.
okay. And then so there's some cool light coming through from the gaps in these arches and whatnot. Um, but what really makes the photograph, at least in my opinion, is this woman who's
Right.
you can't I don't even know what she's doing. It looks like she's like peeking in to see what's going
She
down
was.
there.
She was.
Um,
Well, that's what I have to get. That's why I have the story because basically, what
yeah, yeah,
he taught me, he said you can set your camera, float your ISO, and lock your lens down to the widest point, and
yep,
shoot fast, and put f-stop at 16 or 32 or whatever. And that's probably about what those settings are. But he and we did this a lot. He said you find an interesting spot and then you wait.
yes,
And he said,
yep,
"You wait, and you wait. Like if there's an orange wall, I'm gonna wait for a person in an orange shirt to walk by, and it could be 10 minutes, it could be an hour and a half." And we were both kind of there. He was actually just behind me, and I said, "Okay, so we're gonna wait." And right then, that lady poked her head in, and I just threw up my camera and shot it. And he looked at me, and he went, in
yep.
French, he said, "Shit." He goes, "You got that." He said, "Mail." He said, "You got that," and I didn't. And I said, "Yeah, okay." Because let's face it, when you're doing street photography, a lot of it's luck. You get your camera set, but you get happy accidents or lucky accidents, and that's one of them. And I've actually sold quite a few of those because it means different things to different people.
Hmm.
So it actually Ruth Buzzy, was a TV actress in the 60s and 70s. She lives close by here, and she has one
Oh, cool.
hanging in
Did
their ranch
so
outside of Fort Worth.
did this woman wind up walking down there, or did she
Nope.
just peek
Nope.
in and then walk away?
She poked her head right back, and that was it. And
So
so, and
funny.
immediately I'm chimping and looking on the back, and he comes over and looks, and he went, "Yeah, that's a winner." And so,
Yeah.
and obviously I had to edit it. I was tilted too much, and I didn't shoot it in black and white, so I converted it and things. But that's just kind of, if you look, I mean, a lot of my things are I stop, I look, I'm going to shoot that because when you do street photography, I only take one, maybe two shots, and that's it.
Mhm. Yeah. What he was talking to you about with, setting the fixed focal length, focus point and fixed aperture and stuff, that's called zone focusing. Um, oddly enough, I brought that up in, episode 3 with James Mayer, because he's also a street photographer, and, he I know that he does a lot of zone focusing, and so I actually asked him if his photo was in particular was zone focus, but,
And I don't shoot like that anymore. I mean, I do.
interesting.
He basically said you put it on infinity. I had that was shot with the first version of the Canon 6D, which I think is one of the best value cameras out there, and don't really shoot with it anymore. But it's a great camera. And the 24 to 72.8, and it was set, on I guess is if zone focusing is the kind of first I've heard. It's just set to infinity. So basically, whatever you
Mhm.
shoot's going to be in focus.
Yep.
And the ISO was I think 5,000 on that.
It's interesting that so you use a DSLR and a zoom lens. That's very interesting for somebody who does a lot of street photography because it's not I mean, it's not like a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm just saying it's different than what most street photographers are
Well,
doing,
that's what I
which is
did.
why I find it interesting.
That's what I did. No, that's what I did then. Right now, I shoot with the uh, the Canon R5,
Okay.
and I usually, for if I'm out on the street, it's just an 85 1.2 or 1.4.
Ah.
So
See,
that's
that's
yeah,
more yeah, that's more along a small camera and, usually a prime or
exactly.
a short zoom or something,
I
but
don't like the
that's
50. I go out and I shoot with the 50. I
mhm.
don't like it as much as the 85.
My go-tos for whenever I do street is either 35 or 85. I'll
Right.
swap it depending. I love my favorite focal length by far is 35 millimeter. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I've heard a lot of
Uh,
people do. I need to get one. I don't have a fixed 35, so yeah.
Yeah, but it is hard for street photography to use a 35, because I mean,
It's
if
hard,
you're doing the type where you're like right up next to a person, sure, it works well because you're practically right in their face. But if you're trying to do it from a distance, obviously you can't get close ups. You've gotta
right.
you're gonna be doing
The
wide street
35
photos.
will tell the story more. That's what I've been
Oh
advised
yeah.
by other photographers. Is
Mhm.
one thing if you're like I photographed I spent a lot of time in China because my wife is Chinese, and uh, I photographed, for example, a beggar on the street. I actually gave him some money and I said, just stay there because I'm going to take your picture. And I took it with, I think it was still the 6D and probably the 85. And I focused in on him and he's got praying hands. And that's a great shot. But when I actually have my portfolio critiqued, and the guy said, yeah, it's a great shot, but that could be in Ohio for all I know. You don't have anything else. And I say, well, he's right. I needed to show the temple behind him or whatever it was. And I didn't. I focused in on him. So
Mm.
I guess that's how we learn.
Yeah, yeah, of course. With this photo, so you photographed it in color. You did some angle adjustments, which is, everybody does it.
Of course.
um, so the columns, though, those columns have a lot of gradation in them and texture in them. I'm wondering if you did a bunch of dodging and burning to sort of bring that out, or
Nope.
if it
Nope.
was just that. That's
That texture is, I think, what they call noise. Because when you're shooting at 5,000, it's going to be a little bit noisy. I should pull that photograph up and look at it so I can remember it. I mean, that's kind of, but no, that I did not dodge and burn on that. In fact, no, I didn't. I think a lot of that is, and you might think at the very end where it's kind of light, where it's showing in, but I didn't do any dodging or burning. That's uh, not really. It's not straight out of camera. I can't say that, but I think I might have bumped the shadows up a little bit and the highlights down a little bit, but not. I. It was global. It wasn't on any certain thing.
interesting. Yeah, that speaks volumes for the exposure of the columns in particular. That was probably what was more technically, but I mean, who cares about technical,
Well,
but more technically exposed, correct? You know what I mean?
right.
But
One of the
but it's interesting,
was one of the really great things about this picture, and this is hard to do. See, and I can convey my emotion, but the lady's face is not showing because that's a
right?
real no-no in France. You can't do that. You can't. They have a thing called droit l'image, which means, like for example, here I take a picture. I own the copyright, and I can do not what I want with it because I can't really market it or I can't, but I do have rights to that photo. In France, you take somebody's picture, they have all rights to that photo. You don't.
Hmm.
And I've been warned by people you got to be careful and you can't, show faces and stuff, and they can come back and sue you. And I've heard horror stories ever, but what I liked about this one is I got what I wanted. No, there's absolutely no hassle. Nobody knows who this lady is. And the very first photograph I ever did is the one actually on my portfolio after that, where I have a bicyclist going down in a row of trees. And here again, you don't see his face, but it conveyed exactly what I wanted. The ground's kind of white, and people are like, "Is it snow?" And I'm like, "Yeah, if you want it to be, it's snow." But it's not. But if that's what you want, it's snow. And see that picture. I'm going to digress. I remember. Okay, I love backstories. So that picture, that was in 2012, and I was hosting some of my Chinese family in Paris. And that trip I call five Asians, two half breeds, and a Jew, and that's what it was. And we were all not on the same page. I had some friends come up from the South, and I put all of the other people on a bus to go out to Versailles because I want to go for the umpteenth time. And he and I were walking up to the Champs Elysees, and we're walking. I see this bicycle. I said, Craig, just wait a minute. I'm going to take this picture. I took the picture. Off we went. I didn't think anything of it. In my first show, I blew that up and framed it. And the first guy that walked in said, I'll take it. And I'm like, wow, that was like great. I mean, what a rush to actually sell
Yeah.
something you photograph. So
I mean, it's also the type of, I mean, yeah, we're talking about a different photo for everybody who's listening. We're talking
sorry
about a
about
different
that.
photo
I
right now.
apologize.
Um, but that photo with the cyclist is, I mean, in particular, anybody who's obsessed with bicycles in general would buy that photograph, right? I mean, that's like a um,
Bicycle sell, red doors sell. Anything
mm,
red sells in color photography. If you have
yeah.
something that's red, it sells. Look, I have to tell you, I wasn't always a photographer. I grew up in the clothing business and did that for 30 years. And I knew about markets, I knew about marketing, I knew about merchandising, colors, things like that. And most of all, I knew about retail because I mean, if we're selling pictures, we're in the retail business. And so I figured out pretty quick a lot of the color photography I was selling had red in it. Red seems to sell. And so I made a point to go photograph red things.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David, so much for breaking down this photo with me. I have
My
another question
pleasure.
for you.
Yes, sir.
Uh, what should I have asked you but didn't?
Oh man, you these thought provoking questions.
Yeah, I like to I like to throw a bone into it.
Yeah, you do. What should you have asked me that you didn't? How tall am I? I don't know. It's,
Hey,
uh,
you know what? That's how tall are you?
like, well, I'm shrinking. I'm getting older, so like 5'10", maybe. I
All
guess.
right,
Um,
so we're the same height.
oh, really? Yeah. How old are you,
Yeah,
Scott?
I am just shy of 40.
Okay, I'm 65, so yeah, Medicare year, and
Nice.
well, yeah, it's you could ask me how I got into photography. That would have been a good one.
Sure. How'd you get into photography?
Well, because as I said, I was in the clothing business, and my wife works for AT&T, and we lived in San Antonio, which is my hometown, and we decided to move here for a career, and so I gave up mine because working spouses don't always have it the best tax wise and things like that. So I needed to do something that was going to mirror my kids, and I taught and I translated because I speak a few languages, and did started doing some photography, which clicked. I mean, I'd always done it. I mean, my first camera was a Canon TX back in the film days, and photography started to take off, and I'm photographing around schools, and they're asking me to do portraits, and I'd always kind of done artsy kind of pictures, and pretty soon that became a full-time job, but a full-time job that I could control, especially hours wise. So I'm very, very fortunate because I got to go into a career I really like and also got to raise my boys. So I wouldn't give that up for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So where can our listeners connect with you online?
My uh, uh, well, if they Google me, they'll probably come up with my Smug Mug site, but I kind of only use that for galleries and selling and things like that because I'm not smart enough to make it look good. But I do have a portfolio, and it's just David Rubin Photography, and it's RUBIN .zenfolio.com. And you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, just David Rubin Photography, and not that hard to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening to the photo breakdown. For the show notes and to see the photo shared today, visit photobreakdown.com.